system. Don't blame the courts. It's not the fault of the courts. It's the fault of the law as it exists. The next problem which I'd like to deal with is the various agitations which are taking place in the country for separation and creation of new states. Now, our states we've inherited from our colonial masters, who chose to make states based on conquest at particular points of time rather than any rationale. Look at UP. Eastern UP is contiguous to Bihar. It's got the same culture, the same language. Western UP is contiguous to Haryana and Delhi. In fact, the province of Greater Delhi was split up at the time of 57, because that is the time that the major revolt took place in this particular area. So they punished it by giving one part to Punjab, which has today become Haryana, one part to Rajasthan, one part to UP. That's how it called it, the United Provinces of Agra and Awadh. And Delhi was made into a district of Punjab. This was changed, of course, when Delhi became the capital in 1911. But in 1948-49, when the Constituent Assembly met, members took up this issue and said, this is an imperial wrong which has been done, it needs to be sorted out. And we did not sort it out. It's festered till today. There are similar agitations in different parts of the country. We need to look at them. And finally, the most important thing I say is that we have got river basins all over the country. We've got the largest acreage, second largest acreage of arable land in the world. And we have taken no advantage of it. These are the problems I face today, and I feel we need to discuss these in detail.
Thanks, thank you. Next, Mr. Subhash Chandra, you literally need no introduction on this platform because you were well introduced yesterday. But you're not just the head of a media empire, you've got an empire which straddles many other businesses. So looking at it from that broad point of view, what do you think are the problems that need to be rediscovered?
Well, thank you, John. Picking up where Vishvjit left, that we have inherited certain things from our colonial past. And I would encourage the audiences here to log on to Telegraph of London, 17th of May 2014. And the editorial writes there that if you ask, India has got true freedom now and not in 1947. That's the editorial line the editor has written. And I guess that when though, John, I must say that India has got so many good things, but today's subject is that we are looking at issues and bringing out the problems. That's why I'm mentioning that first and foremost, while our constitution was adopted, and if you look at the Constituent Assembly's debate at that time, almost 350 legislators or the members of the Constituent Assembly said, or the gist of that whole thing was one, that Pandit Nehru, we were looking for a true independence. पूर्ण स्वतंत्रता के लिए हमने जाने दी, हमने लड़ाई की. लेकिन आप फिर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऐसा ला रहे हैं इस देश में जो कि हर चीज को फिर वापस सेंट्रलाइज कर रहा है. जितनी पावर्स, all the rules, powers, regulations are towards centralization in Delhi. And I give you an example that just about 20 years back, a scheme was launched by the government of India that any village which will build some kind of bund to protect the rainwater coming in, government of India will give 50,000 rupees, for example. But then that joint secretary who wrote the policy forgot that half of the districts or half of the villages of this country do not have flooding, they have drought. So what is that scheme meant to be? So people sitting and making laws and regulations and schemes for public good, sitting at Delhi is a big problem. We need to decentralize. We need to give the powers to the people. panchayats and the local governments and local bodies. That's one. Number two, the legislation, every law, and this is what again we have inherited from the legacy of the previous, our British regime, that the bureaucracy, every time when they write a law, they keep discretion. And it is written in our books and constitution that discretion by the public servant should be used for the good of the public. But whereas over a period of time, it has become both ways. Number one, the bureaucrat asks, hey, what is in it for me to use my discretion in your favor? And two, even if he is not asking for any favor, if he uses the discretion in favor of the public, question is raised, what did he benefited out of it? So these are major two things. And third is that because of the parliamentary democracy, because of the voting pattern, the way things have evolved, and Vishvjit, sorry to say this, but because you represented once that Congress party which has ruled majority of the time, a party and everybody has gone into giving the soaps and benefits and everything to the people. With the result, we as Indians, we have lost our self-respect, which wasn't the original culture of India. India knew how to give. I mean, the business community which I represent here, my grandfather told me that whatever you make, you must give 10%, at least minimum 10% as donation for good things. We have stopped giving. We have stopped amassing the value, wealth, everything to ourselves. We have become so self-centered. And we have lost our pride because we have for everything and anything, we go to the government and we seek something from the government. Because governments are also giving us the soaps. They are giving us the subsidies. They are making us dependent on the government so that poor people can vote for them. So these are few fundamental things I think are the issues. If we can find solution, then this country would be truly very different.
Thank you. Mihir, next. I'm glad you joined the platform because as you're the, I looked you up on Google this morning. You're an economist, you're Harvard educated, you're an acerbic critic, you're formerly on the Indian Express, but now you're on the Business Standard, where you edit the opinion page, which ran the most negative review I received on a book that came out a year ago, with the reviewer on your page who said he couldn't understand why I'd written the book. This is the one plug for my book. It's called Implosion. The paperback won an award despite this review, and it's on sale. It's on sale in the bookshop. It sounded like a review written by a really young guy who didn't know what he was writing about, and I've discovered, in fact, he's an 80-year-old gentleman from Gujarat, which I thought only produced good news these days. Anyway, Mihir, to plug for him now, has picked up the themes in my book and done one of his own, which is called Restart. Because in my book, I had the theme that one of the problems of India, and we can come back to this without debating it in too much detail, is Jugaad, which is fix it, and Chauta Hai, which is it'll all be all right on the night. And how can a society, I argued, which believes in fixing things and assuming they'll all be okay, ever be successful, as a broad generalization? And you picked Jugaad up in your book, Restart, judging by the huge spread it got in the Business Standard a week or two ago. So after those cheap laughs, and thank you very much for encouraging me to carry on with that little speech, Mihir, seriously, take the debate on. At this point, we were going to ask Bibek Debroy, who now works for the Revamped Planning Commission, to give us the answers, but he's not here. So Mihir, a restart.
Well, I think I'm going to sort of channel Bibek Debroy in many ways, because I think he and I would agree, as would many other people, that small changes, chote, little at the margins things, are not sufficient to get India working again. And in many ways, the growth that we've had in this country and that we're very fortunate to have had since 1991 was in borrowed time. You had a little spurt of reform in 1991, and which was carried out under duress almost because we were bankrupt. And we did a little bit of work then, and we have benefited from that for over 20 years. The time has come, I think, for all of us to recognize that that wasn't enough, and there is a great deal more that needed to be done. In 1991, some of the work that was done was to sort of clear away the deadwood of 40 years at that point of socialist controls on the economy, telling factories how to produce, how much to produce, telling which factories to set up where. I think a lot of people in this audience would actually probably don't remember the 1980s or the 1970s, and for them it would be a complete shock if they were returned to the India of the 1980s and realized that, you know, you just can't get the products, you just get products that you want. You know, the idea that Coke was somehow a horrible foreign imperialist oppressor, I think would probably shock and dismay a lot of people who are under the age of 30 in this audience.
In the 1980s, I was here for the Financial Times, and when I went to Pakistan and took my family there, they were thrilled to see the stuff that was on the shelves in Pakistan and wasn't available here.
I was a kid in the 1980s, and you used to occasionally see Pakistani TV serials then, just like you see them now. You don't have an entire channel, but you used to get little videos. And Usme, we used to look, my God, they're driving such snazzy cars. We had ambassadors, all right? They're snazzy cars and this, that, and the other. Now, my point being, essentially, that India, yes, has come a long way, and we look around and we say, oh, wow, we have malls. Okay, but the truth is that there is a great deal more that we need to do if we're going to continue to grow at the rate that we have in the past 20 years. We have done very well because we have opened up, we have liberalized our markets for actual goods, right? So I can buy the kind of bottled water I want, I can buy the kind of speakers I want. There isn't just one company or two companies making these things anymore. But however, what we haven't done is free the market up for the things that go into water bottles, or to, you know, creating festivals like this, or into TV channels, or into speakers. In other words, we control our labor markets, we control our land markets, we control our capital markets. These are all the things that you need to have to free up in a particular way if you want a far more efficient economy. We don't allow, for example, any factory with more than 10 people to lay off any of its workers. The amount, if you have 9 people, if you have a factory of 9 people, I may spend possibly half an hour a week doing my paperwork. If I have a factory of 11 people, I spend 2 days a week doing my paperwork. So it's no surprise at all, actually, that therefore, for example, in the textile sectors, most of our factories are under 10 people. Look at Bangladesh, which has a thriving textile industry, export industry, and most of their factories are 150 people. And the larger the factories you are, the more profit they make, and the better it is for workers in many ways, because you have more, a more reliable employment, you have more other factories to go to if yours goes bankrupt. But these are not things that we've talked about for 20 years. The time has now come, I think, and Rajasthan is in fact in many ways taking the lead under the current Chief Minister to start thinking about issues like this. And until we do, and until we actually change laws, India is going to, I'm afraid, will probably grow at only 5 to 5.5%, no matter how optimistic the government is.
What chance do you think of this government beginning to tackle those things?
Well, I think that
And picking up the thought that India's independence came on the 17th of May, was that the election result, or was it?
Yeah, that was the day after.
That was the day after that, but that is a British editor has written about India, that it has got freedom now. But I should say that these things, what you are saying, like labor reforms, if I may say that.
No, please.
Those things are a probably very easy fix, and the governments have announced their intent to do so. But what Vishvjit has mentioned and what I'm trying to communicate, these are the issues which are not on the radar of anybody. What he has mentioned about the problem of the Naxalite, why Naxalism has flourished in India, and it can be a big, big problem. Even if tomorrow they unleash the Indian army, they will not be able to tackle that. And what are the issues he has mentioned and what I have mentioned, I think they are not on the radar. I mean, I'm not saying that what you have mentioned are not the issues. They are definitely real issues, and we need to
But you as a businessman should be siding with him, and not these social things that Vishvjit is talking about. You should be saying.
I would like to just.
We are basically looking for solutions. We are not socialist.
Vishvjit, what I wanted to ask you was, do you recognise the fact that when the Congress government was voted out of power on the 16th or 17th of May, whenever it was, that India then got true independence?
I think that's, I don't agree with that. We got our independence long ago. The problem was completely different. There was a complete logjam, and it was as a result of that that we got completely voted out of power, and we lost the election. That's quite clear. And so obviously the people wanted to change. So they've got the change. Now the question is, we are not debating the past. We're talking about the future.
Future,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
now
let's not get involved in why this happened and who did this and who did that. We are talking about the future.
Well, I
The
couldn't resist one question.
future is very clear. If we are going to have economic reform of the sort that my friend here is speaking about, you have to have a safety net. You see, we may talk in terms of not having the SOPs, but let's understand that the most disadvantaged sections of society, the very poor, the completely uneducated, the women, those who are on the fringes of society, I'm talking about even the tribal societies, they get left behind in this process of development,
Yes.
which we saw in 91 also. When huge development takes place, there is huge poverty which accompanies it. The gap becomes huge. To be able to address that, you have to have special programs for their education, for skill development, and even for their food and their daily living. You need to have some sort of SOPs there. But that is only conditional upon your development. When you've got your development, that's the time you need to look after them.
You need to, yeah.
And it's very essential to do that.
So, carry on with what you were.
No, I agree with him, but people need to, I mean, as a government, I need to give the youth of this country skills. We need to give them guidance. We need to give them certain other things rather than say that, okay, you will get free television like it happened in Tamil Nadu elections. Just to get back into power, you are distributing those kind of things. That's not what it should be. I mean, you as a government, sure, you have to have some social benefit programs, but not just to gain the votes. That's what is the problem.
But we now have got a government which is giving hope. And without going back into the history, the last government didn't give hope because of the SOPs, because it didn't encourage aspirational people to get on and achieve things. So what one needs to do in rediscovering India is to strike a balance between going for growth and getting efficiency and caring and tackling other problems. That doesn't necessarily mean handing out subsidies for people. It surely means tackling problems. It's either naxalites need to be addressed as a serious problem rather than just letting them.
I again reiterate, we have to, just like Mr. Subhash Chandra said, I'm very clear, we have to address the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Because unless we address the fundamentals, changes in our legal system, implement those provisions in the Constitution, it is not an accident that those states which are giving us trouble today, in terms of insurgencies or other things, those are the ones who have constitutional guarantees which have not been implemented.
Yeah, basic issues, which, as he says, the Constitution provides that I should not take away land of a tribal person, whereas most of the lands by the miners and everybody is taken away by these people. And
we need to look at that. We need to look at changes to the CPC, to CRPC. We need to, and the other thing, we are talking about engines of growth. Now, excuse me for saying this. We're talking about engines of growth in terms of industry, in terms of changes in the law. Why don't we look at our land bank? We've got such a huge, it's the second largest acreage of arable land in the world. We can become the granary of the world if we want to. We can become the granary of the world. It is time that we looked at that. We look at our river basins. We need to have different kinds of holistic irrigation programs. And I can assure you that within no time, that will become another engine of growth. Much more than...
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it won't unless certain major changes are made to exactly how land can be bought and sold. Currently, for example, if I am a farmer, okay, I am forced to subdivide my land between all my children. Not all my children may want to farm after me. The smaller my farm becomes over generations, the less money I make out of it. I think only a quarter of farming families now can survive on the money that farming brings in. And this isn't because they don't work hard, they work extremely hard. This happens because their farms are just not big enough. And their farms are not just big enough because they're not able to exit farming the way that they want to. A lot of people need to leave farming, go into other professions. We need to have our farms
But
consolidated.
how would you organise that?
Well, the
We've
first
now
thing
got a
that you do
government which is supposed to organise things and get things done.
we need to be able to buy and sell land more freely. If I'm a farmer, I can't sell to anyone but another farmer. You know, the way that people make money around Delhi and in Haryana is by saying, okay, I'm going to buy up this farmland, pretend to farm it, and then change its land use.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I am a trillionaire after an investment of 100 rupees. Okay, I mean, we all know people who've done stuff like that. We've all heard of individuals of great power who have in fact done stuff like that. So the point essentially being that we have set up our land and the way that we handle land in such a way that farmers are stuck being farmers even when they don't want to be. And if we're going to turn into the granary of the world, which we could, okay, we basically need to be able to be more productive. And if we have so many people farming, we can't. A. B, if you're, again, to return to the question of land, in places that's like Chhattisgarh, like Jharkhand, which have vast coal deposits, vast iron ore deposits, we need to once again look at the people who live there and give them actual property rights over the land. Okay, we've had a halfway house where the government still owns it, but they need consent of the people. This doesn't really work. Okay, because the government can bully people into giving consent. Sometimes people can hold out, even when it's in their, it is good for them to give consent to give away their land. Allow them to sell it. If they sell it, they will be able to get a price that they genuinely believe
Is that
is worthwhile.
politically feasible to get that done?
I think there are many, many ways that, in fact, and I hate to say this, but in Gujarat, they have worked out several clever ways in which land can be pooled and sold to the government. And I'm sure that the Prime Minister is keeping this in mind.
Look at the royalties which are paid for that extraction of all the minerals. The kind of royalties that are paid bear no relation to the actual cost of the product which is sold, the raw material. And that is the largest exploitation of the tribals. We keep saying we're going to plow the money back, but the royalty which is paid is a pittance. That needs to be revived.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I was seeing...
A lot of laws are, as you said, Vishvjit, that they are made during the British regime, which they still continue even today.
I think the amazing thing about the Republic of India in many ways is how easily it slipped into the same habits and the same manifestations of power that its leaders had once decried about the empire. It's like you go to, the center of New Delhi and you see, all our politicians are living in these bungalows that were designed for the ICS and for British officers. And you never bother to think you think that's completely natural. Well, it's not. I don't think the Congress of the 20s or the 30s, the freedom movement, would actually have imagined that 60 years on, its leaders would, or the leaders of an independent Republic of India would still be living and using the restrictive laws that the British had put into place. I simply don't think that was in fact the...
That's why I mentioned about that article of 17th May.
There was a continuum. The idea was to keep a certain amount of stability.
Sorry.
That was the original idea. But unfortunately, what happens with stability is it creates its own, what shall I say, fulcrum, whereby you think of it as a security, and then it doesn't move from there.
Exactly. It's like the debate over the... sorry.
No, go on.
I'll tell you something strange. There were, people talk of Delhi and Lutyens' Delhi. Lutyens' Delhi has to be preserved as it is. Let's understand that a large part of Lutyens' Delhi was constructed as jerry-built buildings during the war temporary accommodation to accommodate the Southeast Asian Command, which was based in India. And can you imagine those houses? I've lived in two of them, were actually built like warehouses. And everybody says those are Lutyens' houses. You can't dig a nail into the wall, everything falls down, and it's a Lutyens' bungalow.
I'm going to open this up to a few questions. Before I do, Subhash, tell us, do you think that India gained true independence on May the 17th? You brought it up. Do you think so, and why, very quickly, and how can that independence be used?
Well, largely yes, because I agree largely due to that because this is the first time that a truly single party which was different than when Congress got the independence from the Britisher, got that view. And largely because of, I don't have problem with if my cabinet ministers are living in those big bungalows, as long as they don't want any further money to be pocketed. So, I would say that.
Well, let's hope. A question there in the middle.
Sir, I absolutely love your book, Implosion. I don't really know why people have really criticized it. So I want to ask you, you have a big section in it about Jugaad and Chalta Hai attitude. I want to know how to change that certain attitude which is embedded in Indians. And my second question is, I'm asking it to you, do you believe this 17th May independence, I mean, do you believe in this concept? Because I personally feel it's like a UPA 3 coming again. All right, and I'm already waiting for your book, which is going to come on the shortcomings and scams of UPA 3.
I believe on May the 17th that the country needed a strong new leader, and I think that Narendra Modi was the only politician around who could be that new strong leader. Whether his policies will work, whether he will be able to do it is a different issue. But in terms of leadership, there was no alternative. On Jugaad and Chalta Hai, very quickly, Jugaad is fix it. Fix it taken on to its next stage in engineering terms is frugal engineering, where you take the merits, the good things about doing things with minimal expense and move on to do fine things. And that is the attitude. If the country becomes more efficient, if you can achieve things not by bribing civil servants and ministers, by actually taking regulations that are properly administered and then achieving, then Jugaad begins to become less important. And Chalta Hai isn't such a problem because things are really okay. A question here?
I wanted to ask
you about Jugaad, sorry.
Yeah. It's just to the panel in general. I wanted to say that it's been about 5, 6, 7 months since the new government has come in power. And you talk about whether May 17th was when India got freedom. I want to ask you how a politician is always limited to somebody who's just selling a dream. Take, for example, Indira Gandhi. She put up the slogan of Garibi Hatao in the 70s. Many slogans, many things and many rhetoric. However, it is always limited to rhetorics and words, and this sense of optimism and belief will fade down in the coming years. How do you think we tackle the rhetoric and actually translate the rhetoric into action?
Subhash.
Much of the, before you start,
I would
like to
say that by single thing, if you ask me one little thing, what we can do to turn the rhetoric into reality is by decentralizing all the powers, giving to the local government, whether it is village or the towns. If we do that, I think those dreams can be realized of the public.
Absolutely true. Though, of course, one thing does remain, whenever there is rhetoric, it is accompanied by some sort of action. It may not be complete action,
Yes.
but there is a certain amount of things which does filter down. Now, that completion can only come by, according to your suggestion.
But
That's
yes,
absolutely right.
Decentralization.
John?
Decentralization.
Something about this subject. I can't
John?
see one.
I'll just,
sorry.
On May the 15th, I think, is far more interesting than May the 17th in many ways. Because if you're going to talk about all the expectations that were built up during the campaign, you have to ask, when on May the 17th you knew Narendra Modi was going to be your prime minister, did you know what he was going to do with the country? No, because the expectations were built up in the absence of any coherent policy program. He was never questioned on what he would spend. He was never questioned on what his, the details of his programs. We just did not have an election campaign like that. We never talked about policy. We talked about dreams. And until we start talking about the details of things and holding people to claims and checking their mathematics and their arithmetic and their fiscal deficit targets, we are just going to be sold dreams.
Very right.
Sure.
Yeah, my question is, don't you think the Indian population is mostly fooled by the idea of development for the fact that it is not inclusive development? Now, when you speak of labor reforms, I don't know till what extent that is labor reforms, because once you deregularize the labor front, it is leading to disguised unemployment. Secondly, where is the bargaining power of the labor which is grossly at stake? There is a gross compromise of human rights. And to be honest, where is the labor, I mean, where are the labor rights that we speak of?
Who wants to take that?
I'll take that. Just on the question of labor law reform, as a matter of fact, if you go to any factory between Jaipur and Rajasthan, any auto factory, it appears that labor law has already been implemented. They seem to be able to hire and fire and will. The reason that they're doing that is because, in fact, most companies are massively violating the law. All that happens now is that the law is not implemented because it is impossible to follow. Labor inspectors are bribed, and on the same assembly line making your Maruti car, you'll have a regular employee who is paid 5 to 6 times as much as the contract employee. Now, this is basically unfair, and that is exactly the situation that bad law creates. It hurts the workers much more than it hurts everybody else.
One of the problems in this country is that you don't get issues debated as they are being debated here. And labor law for years was something that American companies always wanted changed, and nobody here worried very much about. It's open debate by governments, pushing ideas and then debating which is needed. We've got a question here somewhere. Somebody's got the mic.
There's one in front.
Hello. My question is to all of you. Do we see the development as something like money coming from outside and very much the Chinese model? Or can we have an alternative approach, something like, developing India's own economy in its own pockets, not looking at the infrastructure, the roads, and everything else as the part of development?
You're asking about foreign investment and whether it should, it should come in.
Talking about making the villages very much, sufficient within themselves, and looking at the economy which is not very much the Western kind of economy and very much the Western kind of development. Thank you.
Well, I didn't plant that question, but the organisers of this festival think I did, because I want to make a point how sad it is that Full Circle is no longer running the bookshop at this festival, but that Amazon, that Amazon, which has come in with $2 billion of investment, has been able to outbid India, and that's one of the problems of multinationals, that they come in and swamp good local enterprises. I've been saying I would mention that, but I've got to get some answers from you people.
Well, I can stake it because of being in business. I feel that India has got sufficient within itself to progress. I don't think a lot of people do talk about foreign investments and all that. I think it's an open economy. That's what we should pursue. But I don't think India is fully dependent on foreign investment. We can do on our own.
I'm told we've got to close.
One last
half
word.
a sentence.
It's not a question of foreign investment or investment from here. It's a question of our priorities.
Yeah.
And it's the priorities which have to change. That is what's more important.
That is what I agree.
A word?
I agree.
On this subject, I just want to say that I like it when people give me money. So I generally welcome foreign investment, including in myself.
So that means buy his book at the end of the session. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Warm round of applause for the panelists for that session, A Rediscovery of India, presented by Nikkei Asian Review.